Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is IMAX Sports and Football video, and today I'm going over my Week 8 power rankings for the 2024 NFL season. It's crazy that we're almost halfway through the season. It feels like this one has just begun. But with that being said, let's get right into it. First off, as always, we have the dumpster fire. We have the Browns at 32, the Panthers at 31, the Patriots at 30, and the Dolphins at 29. All of these teams stayed exactly where they were. They all lost. Most of them got demolished. The Browns may end up increasing their position in the future if Jameis Winston is able to start winning games. Deshaun Watson was not the solution for them, and it's unfortunate that he got injured, but Deshaun Watson just was not the solution for the Browns right now, and if Jameis Winston starts playing well, then possibly they could win some games, but for right now, they're staying at 32. The Panthers got killed, once again, by Washington this time, so it was at least by a decent team. They only scored one touchdown, and unfortunately, again, we had another quarterback injury. Jaden Daniels went out in the middle of the game, and the Panthers were still beaten by the Washington backup. The Patriots are at 30. The Patriots, although we had a decent... Drake May is looking very good in his first two starts. The team is looking horrendous. The defense has gotten worse ever since we put Drake May in, and Drake May has had two very strong games to start off his career. He has over 500 yards with 5 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions in his first 2 games, and he's looking relatively promising. Although our offense has not been phenomenal and our defense has been terrible, I think that there is some potential with Drake May. As for the Dolphins at 29, they have not been able to fix their quarterback situation. Some of the games have been closer than others, like this week, but they still are on a losing streak. Moving on, we have meh. We have the Titans, the Raiders, the Jaguars, the Jets, and the Giants. All of these teams are teams that could have potentially been considered decent at some point in the last couple of years. The Jets were supposed to be good this year. The Jaguars won a playoff game a couple of years ago. Tennessee won a playoff game a couple of years ago. The Raiders looked like they were going to be promising last year, the year before, and the Giants. Well, maybe the Giants don't belong on that same wavelength, but the Giants are the best team out of this group so far this year. All of these teams are on massive losing streaks, except for the Giants. The Giants have recently beat the Seattle Seahawks. The Raiders have also won a couple of fluke games this season, including one against the Ravens. And then the Tennessee and Jacksonville have lost most of their games, but recently Jacksonville has broken their streak. They did beat the Patriots this week in England, so they had a massive victory over the Patriots, 32 to 16. And then the Jets lost this week to the Steelers. The Jets Aaron Rodgers has not been the solution for the Jets. Firing Robert Saleh has also not been the solution for the Jets. Obtaining Devontae Adams off waivers has not been in a trade has not been the solution for the Jets. And the Jets just cannot figure out how to win games no matter who they have on their team. If they have Rodgers and Adams with a top-level defense and they don't have their coach anymore, that was supposed to be the problem. I still don't know how they're not beating teams as okay as the Steelers. Like, the Steelers are not the world's best team right now. So the Jets they clearly are cursed to some extent, and I'm very interested to see how their season finishes out. Tennessee still can't win a game. They did win one game at some point this season, but they're still having challenges moving the ball down the field consistently, and their defense is not great. As for the Raiders, they got killed this week. They've gotten killed a couple of times recently, but they've probably been the most inconsistent team here other than the Giants. They've had some good wins. They've showed some promise, but Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew both look horrendous at quarterback. Moving on to hit or miss, we have the Rams at 23, the Saints at 22, and the Colts at 21. The Rams finally got their second win of the season. I believe they were 1-1 after week 2, and then they lost 4 or 5 games in a row. They were finally able to get their second win of the season off the back of Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams is a monster. He's one of the only running backs that's even anywhere close to Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, or Saquon Barkley this season for production. He can do it all. He can run, he can catch, he can get touchdowns, and with the absence of Cooper Kupp and with the Rams offense in the passing game being mostly pedestrian this season, Kyren Williams has been a massive spark, and he's the only reason why the Rams are scoring any points, never mind winning games. The Saints are at 22. The Saints Rippon, their new quarterback, have looked. Or sorry, Spencer Rattler, not Rippon. With Spencer Rattler, the Saints have looked decent on offense. But same situation with the Patriots. As their offense has improved, their defense has gotten worse. They gave up 51 points to Tampa last week, and then this week they gave up almost 40 or 44 points again this week. And with the new quarterback Spencer Rattler, Spencer has looked great, but they really don't have any weapons. Alvin Kamara didn't have a great showing this week. They gave up 33 points, not 40, to the Broncos. And similar to the Patriots, the defense has just fallen straight down a cliff. And I'm not really sure what the challenge is. I'm not sure why the defense has all of a sudden gotten worse, and why all of the offensive players are so terrible now that the quarterback's playing well. But it's just an unfortunate situation, and I'm curious to see if the Saints are going to be able to turn around their season. The Colts are at 21. The Colts have had one of the most lopsided seasons of all time. They've had Andrew Luck in at quarterback ever since the injury to Anthony Richardson, and the Colts are now, I believe, 4-3. They've had a decent run this season. They've been able to beat some tough teams, but they've also lost some games that they should not be losing. The Colts are just somewhere in the middle. They could potentially make a playoff run if some of the AFC teams don't perform as they're expected to down the line. Or if Anthony Richardson is able to come back from injury and ball out. But the Colts kind of just seem to be in one of those years where they're not going to be doing much of anything. They're just going to kind of stay in the middle. They'll get an okay draft pick. They'll add some pieces, and then next year they might be able to fight for a playoff spot. Moving on to mid. These are the teams that are just below average that could potentially that are mostly disappointments. The Cowboys are at 20. They did not play this week, and that's why and they have not moved positions. If they played this week and they won, they'd probably move up a little bit, but they're staying in the same spot they were last week for right now. The Cardinals are at 19. They lost. Sorry, they've not played yet this week. They play Monday Night Football. If they lose them, they'll move below the Cowboys, but they won't move any lower than that. They are probably one of the best 2-4 teams in the history of the NFL. They're 2-4, but they've had the hardest schedule in the league, and they've proven time and again that they have a consistently good offense, and their defense is a work in progress, but there is potential there. I think that the Cardinals could make the playoffs in an alternate universe where the NFC North is not entirely stacked. In this universe, the Cardinals likely will not be making the playoffs, but it's a good transition year for Kyler Murray to gain some confidence, for Marvin Harrison Jr. to have a rookie season, and for the Cardinals offense to just kind of gel. James Conner is getting old, so it's unfortunate that they won't be fighting for anything this year, because next year James Conner will be a year older. But he's still young enough where he doesn't seem to be losing any steps yet. So I think that the Cardinals offense will still be just as good next year, and hopefully they can add some defensive pieces in the offseason. The Seahawks are at 18, the 49ers are at 17, and the Bengals are at 16. All three of these teams are potentially in the running for the playoffs. The Bengals are 3-4. They have the second worst record in this category. But they're at 16 because they are turning their season around. For the most part, their only really bad game was the loss to the Patriots, and that was a Week 1 game. And we all know that Joe Burrow is not a Week 1 quarterback. The Bengals, ever since then, have been 3-3. Their three losses were to some pretty good teams like the Commanders, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. And although they don't look like they'll be fighting in the playoffs, they could potentially make a spot if Joe Burrow continues to play like he's been playing. He played at an MVP caliber for the first 5 weeks. The last couple weeks have not been as strong, but there's still been good showings. The Seahawks and the 49ers have both been very up and down teams. Seattle's 4-3. The Niners are either 3-3 or 3-4. The Niners lost this week to Kansas City. Brock Purdy had a horrendous showing, and neither of these teams seem to be able to beat anyone competent. None of the teams in this category can beat a competent team other than the Cardinals, who are in last place. The Seahawks did win a game against a competent team this week, beating the Atlanta Falcons, but they've lost most of their games against good teams, and they've mostly beaten the league's worst. Moving on to could be good, we have the Broncos at 15, the Chargers at 14, the Bears at 13, the Falcons at 12, and the Steelers at 11. The Broncos at 15 lost to the Chargers last week, but they bounced back this week with a massive win. Over the Saints. I don't know why I was blanking there. The Broncos had a phenomenal win this week. They have demolished both the Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the Broncos have been a relatively good team this year. They have turned it around over the last few weeks. They've won 4 of their last 5 games, I believe. They are now 4-3, with their only loss of the last 5 weeks being to the Chargers, obviously. And Bo Nix looks good. All of the rookie quarterbacks look really good. Bo Nix looks real good. Bo Nix looks a little below Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams, but he still looks solid. And I think that he's a good enough quarterback to win games with this team, and this team is going to have some success in the future with Bo Nix. The Chargers are at 14. They have not played yet this week. They'll play tomorrow night. But if they win, then they'll probably move up to either 13 or 12. If they lose, then they'll probably stay where they are. They might move down to 15. The Bears are at 13. It's hard for me to put the Bears any higher than 13 because they really haven't beaten anybody. They are 4-2. They've had a solid record. They haven't lost to anybody bad. Actually, they did lose to the Colts. That was not a great loss. But they've played mostly as expected. Caleb Williams has had a very strong rookie season, going 4-2, and he's played better and better offensively every single week. That's one thing that you like to see in rookies, is that Caleb Williams has improved some aspect of his game every week, and he looks like a better quarterback week in and week out, and his statistics are improving as well. With that being said, I need to see the Bears play against and beat a competitive team before they can crack into the top 10. But for the most part, they've had a solid start to the season, and it's probably been better than most people expected it to be. The Falcons are at 12. They're also 4-3 as opposed to 4-2. They lost this week to the Seattle Seahawks. They got kind of demolished. But the Falcons have proven to me that they are a top half, maybe even top 10 team in some cases, just because they have been able to compete against good teams, and they've been able to win games against good teams. The Falcons did lose to the Steelers earlier on in the season in Week 1, and then since then, Kirk Cousins has played better and better every single week. The offense has really gelled, and it's the first time that the Falcons' offense has looked competent since Matt Ryan left. As for the Steelers at number 11, the Steelers are probably one of the most confusing teams in the league this season. They're 5-2, but it's a respectable 5-2. They've had some good wins, including one against the Falcons and one against. They beat the Jets this week. They beat a couple of decent teams. They haven't beaten anybody phenomenal, but they have some. Most of their losses are against competent teams as opposed to some of the other teams below them. Justin Fields looks to be like he's the right fit for this team. Russell Wilson did play this week. I believe Justin Fields may have gotten injured. Or Russell Wilson finally came back from his injury. A lot of people were questioning whether or not Russell Wilson was actually injured. But with that being said, with the return of Russell Wilson, the offense looks relatively the same. Both of these quarterbacks are Russell Wilson's a guy that's older in his career. Justin Fields is a guy that's very young. They both play similar styles of football, and the offense has looked similar from what we saw this week against the Jets under both quarterbacks. I don't expect the Steelers to be making a lot of changes, but I do think that Russell Wilson has a higher ceiling than Justin Fields does. Moving on to strong contenders, we have the Eagles at 10, the Commanders at 9, the Bills at 8, the Buccaneers at 7, and the Texans at 6. This is really, there's only 10 contenders in my opinion this season. I don't see anybody outside of the top 10 even coming close to the Super Bowl. Usually there's a few teams outside of the top 10 that you think, hey, this team could be a wild card. I don't think anyone outside of this top 10 could be a wild card. And I don't even think everybody in this group of 5 is a contender. Specifically Washington, and the Eagles, I don't know if they are really going to be competing for a Super Bowl ring. The Eagles did win this week, but they beat the Giants. They beat them 28-3. Funny number. But with that being said, they've had a very lopsided season. They've beaten some good teams. Again, like a lot of people have been, they've lost to some teams. They've lost some games they shouldn't have. For the most part, Jalen Hurts has looked okay. He's been very up and down, and overall the team just hasn't had the same consistency that it has the last couple of years, but they're starting to get some of that back, and I do think that the Eagles are going to have a solid season. The Commanders have looked great with Jaden Daniels. They won this week against the Panthers after their loss last week. They bounced back after their second loss of the season. They're now 5-2. Jaden Daniels did get injured. It's a rib injury, so he should probably be out 3 to 5 weeks based on history. I don't know the extent of the injury, so I'm not really going to comment on it much else. But with that being said, Marcus Mariota is a competent backup. They can kind of hold the fort down before Jaden Daniels gets back so they can still make the playoffs. The Bills, the Buccaneers, and the Texans. The Bills and Bucs both won this week. They both won expected games. There wasn't really much to be said there. Tampa plays tomorrow. The Bills won a game they were expected to win. And then the Texans lost. The Texans lost their second game of the season this week to the Green Bay Packers. And the absence of Nico Collins has been felt. Last week they were against the Patriots. It was not felt at all. The Patriots' defense was horrendous, and they demolished them. This week it was felt. They were mostly carried by Joe Mixon. It was not the greatest game in the history of the world for C.J. Stroud, and you could definitely tell that he was missing his number one wide receiver. I don't know how long Nico Collins' injury is for. I think it's only a couple more weeks. I don't think it will impact Houston's season a whole lot. They'll definitely still win their division. But for right now, they're not as good as they will be once Nico Collins returns from injury. Last but certainly not least, we have the NFL's elite. At number 5, we have the Packers. At 4, we have the Ravens. At 3, we have the Vikings. At 2, we have the Lions. And at number 1, we have the Kansas City Chiefs. If the Ravens lose tomorrow, they'll be bumped down to number 5 below the Packers. I don't expect them to lose. I think that the Ravens will most likely win their game. But if they do, they'll be bumped down. The Packers are up to number 5 after they won this week against the Houston Texans. They've only lost 2 games this season. One of them was week 1. And then the second one was when Jordan Love was coming off of injury against the Vikings in a 2-point loss. Jordan Love looks like the new Brett Favre. He looks like he's going to be the first player in a long time to make the Pro Bowl while also leading the league in interceptions. And for the most part, he's had a phenomenal start to his career. I'm a big fan of Jordan Love. I think he's going to do great things. And this Packers offense looks unstoppable right now. The Vikings are number 3. The Vikings have lost 1 game this season, this week against the Lions, and another 31-29 showing. And they've had almost no flaws this season. The Vikings have been balanced on offense and defense. They've destroyed some good teams like the Texans, and for the most part, they've had a phenomenal season. I think that Sam Darnold has fit really well in this offense. He didn't have the greatest game ever this week. He may or may not be falling out of the MVP conversation, but the Vikings are still a very strong team, and they're still going to finish atop the NFC in some top 2 or 3 spot, possibly a 5 seed if they lose the division to the Lions, but they'll have a top 2 or 3 record in the league or in the NFC, and they look good on defense, which is something that you can't always say about the Vikings. The Lions did win this week, reclaiming their spot atop the NFC North. Yes, we have 3 NFC North teams in here. The NFC North is dominating the NFC. I can't imagine any of these 3 teams not being in the championship. There has to be an NFC North team in the NFC Championship game at this point. I think it's inevitable. One of these 3 teams are the 3 best teams by far in the NFC. The Lions only lost 1 game. It was a 4-point loss to Tampa Bay week 2. Since then, Jared Goff has had 3 consecutive games where he's had a passer rating near 150. He's been nearly perfect for 3 consecutive weeks. And this Lions offense is looking better than it's ever looked in under the Dan Campbell reign, which is saying a lot considering how good they were last year. And finally, Kansas City, they won again. Big whoop. Patrick Mahomes played horrendous. He had 2 interceptions. The only reason why they won was because Brock Purdy had 3 interceptions. But the Kansas City defense is unstoppable. This defense is something else. And even though Patrick Mahomes is having his worst season of his career, the Chiefs are somehow 6-0. Or 7-0, one of those 2. Either way, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I make these power rankings every single week, and hopefully I'll be able to get to some more videos now that I've settled into my new position, but we'll see about that. So, thank you guys all for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.